mechanistic considerations, amongst which hyperosmolarity and inflammation play a key role. Histologic dry eye disease was classified as due to either insufficient production or impaired stability of tears, and such a dichotomous classification does not fit with the reality of clinical practice, since any abnormality of the ocular surface can trigger disequilibrium in all the other components of tear dynamics. Therefore, decision-making becomes an integral and extremely important perspective in the management of dry eye disease. We are fortunate to have with us a stalwart in the field of ophthalmology here today, Dr. Virender Singh Sangwan. Dr. Sangwan is the Director of Innovation, Consultant, Cornea and Interior Segment, Ocular Immunology and Uveitis Services at Dr. Shroff Charity Eye Hospital, Delhi. He is best known for the limbal stem cell culture procedure invented by him for his innovative surgical techniques. He has handled roles from clinics to research to innovation at the world-renowned L.V. Prasad Eye Institute at Hyderabad till 2018. Dr. Sangwan is the founder secretary of the Asia Cornea Society, Uveitis Society of India, and LVPEI Alumni Association of Ophthalmologists. Dr. Sangwan has received numerous awards and honors. Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award in Medical Sciences 2006, National Technology Award 2007, and he was ranked in the top 10 medical researchers in India in 2015. He has 245 publications in peer-reviewed index journals, 550 presentations to his credit, and has contributed 15 chapters in textbooks. With these few words, I now invite Dr. Sangwan for his talk. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rajat. Good evening, friends. I would like to thank Mankind Pharma for to interact with you all. And this evening, we'll be talking about clinical decision making. My request to all of you is please be interactive, ask questions, and I will try to answer each and every question during the question and answer session. Let us think about different situations we encounter in the clinic. For example, if a patient, 28 years old engineer who works in a computer several hours of the day in an air-conditioned room, presents to you with ocular irritation, mild pain, tiredness of eyes. Systemic and ocular exam is unremarkable, no visual complaint. Here, his tear breakup time is 12 seconds, Shermer values are normal. What advice and how to treat? I won't answer these questions here. What I'm hoping is I'll present these case scenarios and then move on to the presentation. And hopefully during the presentation, you should be able to get the answers. If not, please do ask during the question answer session. Second situation, a 48-year-old lady, housewife, complains of mild pain, dryness of eyes, eye strain, systemic and ocular examination unremarkable except non-specific mild joint pain. No visual complaints, surface staining normal in both eyes, tear breakup time and Shermer values are normal. What advice? How to treat? 55-year-old lady with rheumatoid arthritis, more than 10 years on treatment with HCQ and methotrexate. Complaint of ocular irritation, light sensitivity, rough feeling in both the eyes. Her uncorrected visual acuity was 618. With correction, she improved 6.6. Her tear breakup time is 5 seconds. Shermer value, Shermer 1 is 4. Surface staining is positive. And her main concern, she says, doctor, will I go blind due to this condition? Because many doctors have told me that this condition is not treatable and you may lose eyes. So what is your advice and how would you treat? This is a boy who presented with this clinical appearance, as you can see in the video. And his 12-year-old boy with history of itching for 5 years, redness, poor vision, ocular examination, as you see in the video. And systemic review, there's nothing remarkable. His tear breakup time was 8 seconds, Surmer values were 13. And here I hope that you can make out his primary problem is not the dry eye, but his primary problem is the vernal keratoconjunctivitis, which is quite severe, both the limbal as well as the palpable form. This is a 15-year-old boy with a history of bone marrow transplant 5 years back, with history of ocular irritation, mild pain, not able to open both eyes, reduced vision, and he says lot of thick white discharge coming from both the eyes. 5 years back, he had undergone bone marrow transplant from her aunt and for the ALL, and he is also on cyclosporin 50 milligram per day and 5 milligram visolone daily. His vision is 636 in the right eye, 618 in the left eye, and improves to near normal with the pinhole. His tear breakup time is 3 seconds and Surmer value also in the same range. How would you treat? What is your advice? In these short video clips of my patients who have undergone limbal transplantation are chemical burn patients. What I want you to observe is most of these patients do not have any dry eye. They are generally patients with the chemical burns, do have surface panners, irregularities, but generally they are not very dry. So make that distinction. And in the next, you will see another kind of clinical presentation where you have tremendous dryness and a very different picture. Here, there's no question. Here, this is a patient who presented, who's a 25-year-old with fever, skin and mucosal eruptions, history of ocular irritation, pain, discharge, a lot of gunk coming out of both the eyes. He was diagnosed as Steven Johnson and was treated in a burns unit. And this is one of his eye, and you'll see this other eye as well. There is a tremendous intolerance to light. His thermal values and but in the right eye is 0. In the left eye, it's slightly better. How would you treat? What is your plan? What additional examination you want to know in terms of his appearance of the lids, lid margin, the tarsal and bulbar conjunctiva? And this is the story of a boy whose 10-year history of severe dry eye in both eyes. And he came to me in LVP for a second opinion, and you hear his story, and then I'll give a little more brief.
Hi, I'm Mayank, and I am from Ranchi. I had a specific problem in my eye. My day-to-day activities were getting disturbed. Before coming here, I visited Chennai, Bangalore, Kolkata, Delhi, Mumbai, and a couple more. All of them being topmost eye hospitals all over India, but they all did my procedure and they all went through certain checks and no one could actually find a solution to it. Dr. Ashok Agarwal then referred me to LV Prasad Eye Institute. I came here in November 2016. My experience has been just life-changing, and it's been very good.
So Mayank had an eye problem, which was diagnosed as dry eye at many places for last 10 years. So here he came with the referral that the boy is feeling depressed, and because he's not able to see light and all that. So when I examined him, I did not find that he has a dry eye, or in fact, he has any eye problem. And it was very difficult for him and the parents to understand that this is not an eye problem, what we are dealing with. And then we started talking about what is that we are dealing with. Then I gave them different suggestions that maybe we should look at, consulting a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And it turns out that he had consulted a very good psychiatrist, and he was on a medical treatment, which is making a tremendous difference. Very happy with his current treatment, and I wish him all the best.
I was worried about this for the past 10 years of my life, and had I not been here, I don't know how would my future be. I'm so lucky to have you as my mentor, sir.
So let me give you a little Let me give you a little more background and context to what the problem was. The parents are very well to do. They came from Jaipur, and they came with the history that the boy has severe dry eye and he is depressed because of that. When I went to the examination room, he's like, his cell phone illumination is reduced to bare minimal. Room lights were dim. He says, no, doctor, I don't like light. Please don't switch on. And I said, okay. So I perform an examination. And when I'm doing the slit lamp, I don't see that he's light insensitive or light sensitive. There's no reflex steering. Then I did the breakup time, summer values, did the surface staining, perfectly normal. Then I said, well, we need to do another test and see if you get a relief. This is, I do generally in many of these patients with dry eye, especially who complain so much. I said, Prose lens or the Boston scleral lens we will try. So I sent him and he came back. He said, well, no, I really didn't feel any benefit from that. Then, by the end of the day, I made up my mind that it's not dry eye. And to me, he had something else which is not diagnosed. So I sat with their parents, both of them very well educated, very well to do. I said, we have been treating him as if like he has, somebody who has diabetes and we are treating him for blood pressure. Then they said, what do you mean? All those doctors were wrong? I said, I don't know the doctors were wrong, what the problem, but you have come for a second opinion with me. And my sincere advice is that it is not dry eye. There is something else we should look at. He said, what do you mean? What we should look at? I said, we should look maybe psychologist, maybe psychiatrist, that he may have some problem. Then they were not willing to accept. Then through counseling on that day, 2 sessions I had with parents and the boy, and they finally agreed, and they saw a psychiatrist in town whom I usually refer my patients. And he put him an anti-treatment for depression. And then this video is shot after 1 month. He was a changed person. And he immediately realized that what the problem was. So many a times, because the patient is coming with a particular label and you don't question the label, you don't trust your examination, you just go with the flow and say, yeah, it's a dry eye, and you just prescribe another agent. So please pay attention to the examination. Please listen to the patient and try to correlate if those 2 things are correlating or not. How you can do that? The ocular surface, normal ocular surface, like what you see in the video, you see it's very wet. You can see the Purkinje image on the cornea and the tear lacrimal lake, the blinking. So the ocular surface defense elements consist of 3 things: preocular tear film, ocular surface epithelia, ocular surface sensitivity, meaning innervation. And the ocular surface and cornea are one of the most sensitive part of the human body. They are richly supplied with the nerves. The elements further, if you break down, the stable preocular tear film consists of compositional factors, hydrodynamic factors. The compositional factors, traditionally we talk about lipids, aqueous fluid, and mucins. And these are not like different compartments. This is like a mixture. And each of them are secreted by different, contributed by different glandular system or the epithelial system. Then the hydrodynamic factors, they're equally important. For example, the lid blinking is required for spreading of the tears, and lid closure, if it is incomplete, if there is a paralysis, the tear clearance won't be there, and that also will give rise of dry eye symptoms. Despite having a lot of tears, the patient will complain of dry eye. Then you have the conjunctiva, and they have a very important, significant role to play in the maintenance of the tear film, because the conjunctiva forms a smooth, flexible, protective covering for the entire front part of the eye. It is essential for the integrity of tear film, which is critical for corneal transparency. And the corneal transparency and refraction of light, 80% of the refraction happens at the interface of preocular tear film and air. So any degradation of the epithelia or tear film will lead to tremendous loss of vision or quality of the vision. Therefore, it's very important to pay attention to conjunctival health. And this conjunctival health the mucin component is primarily coming from the mucin secreting goblet cells from the conjunctiva dispersed all around. Then the whole of these multiple factors are integrated into an orchestra by two reflex arcs controlling the tear secretion and lid blinking, the 7th and 5th nerve, the parasympathetics, and the clearance by the lid blinking. These two, or all these things, happen at the level of the brainstem, at the midbrain. So you have the preocular tear film epithelia. When the dry spots develop, when there's enough dry spots, there is a stimulus to the nerves, and through the afferent pathway, it goes to the midbrain, and there it sends a signal through the parasympathetics for secretion of the tears from the lacrimal gland, mucin, and at the same time the lid blinking moment. And this is perfectly well balanced, in terms of the stable tear film is essential for the healthy ocular surface. Healthy ocular surface is essential for the stable tear film. So this interdependence is something very, very critical for the well-functioning, and both of these elements are required for the optical elements or the optical system of the eye, the cornea, to work very well. So when you are examining patients of dry eye, just don't think that they trivial kind of patient. Look and pay attention to the details. How you notice, like in these videos, you can pay attention in the lid margin very quickly on the slit lamp. I mean, if you find some secretions coming out, that gives you an indication. Pay attention to the eyelashes, where you may find blepharitis or demodex. Very common nowadays in India, and it's critical for diagnosing that condition. The signs of blepharitis would consist of collarettes. Collarettes are essentially, these are chronic inflammation at the hair follicle and glands and causing vascularization. There could be lid margin hyperemia. There can be tylosis, madrosis, poliosis, trichiasis, and development of papillary conjunctivitis. And 50% of these patients would have some sort of dry eye. So blepharitis as a cause of dry eye is commonly missed and underdiagnosed. And it's also called anterior blepharitis. And mostly it is a staphylococcal infection, low-grade staphylococcal infection. Also, it is called seborrheic blepharitis. There are basically dandruff-like deposits on the eyelashes. And all these things create alteration in the tear film, which makes the symptoms, which are worse in the morning when you get up. The treatment would be very specific: lid hygiene, cleaning, and then some sort of a steroid antibiotic ointment with a fair amount of lubricants. When you examine and find there is a thick pultaceous material coming out of the meibomian glands, a clear sign that these are dysfunctional. And now you can examine the meibomian gland with ocular surface analyzer or meiboscopy or variety of other devices. So it's become much more easier, but the most reliable sign is clinical. So you may find block, like here, what you are seeing. You can see the meibomian gland orifices are plugged with secretions and very difficult to come out. And that is why in these patients, warm compresses and lid hygiene is what is prescribed, and lid massage. This is also called posterior blepharitis, or this is of two types, obstructive and secretory type. And this is also a very frequent cause of dry eye and associated meibomian gland disease. Here, the alteration in the polar lipids, which leads to the problem and unstable tear film. Here, the treatment would be lid hygiene, warm compresses. So see here, the decision making is this, that try to make, even the patient will come with the signs of dry eye only, but they won't be telling you that I have meibomian gland dysfunction or blepharitis. It's you to pick up. Here, the treatment is primarily of meibomian gland disease, MGD, not the dry eye. Dry eye is secondary problem here. Then you may have problems in lid abnormalities, like a small defect, notch here in the upper lid can create problems. The lids can be tight, they can be loose, or what we call lid laxity. There are different kind of treatment, distichiasis, entropion, ectropion, which can be very subtle. You can have blinking abnormalities, like computer vision syndrome is primarily because when you do any intellectual work, your attention is focused and you system forgets to blink. So you develop, the symptoms of dry eye. And also if there is leg ophthalmos, or if there is ocular surface irregularities in the form of Dellen or formation of pterygia or localized elevations. Then there are some conditions like on the conjunctiva. Remember, the conjunctiva is important part of the ocular surface, and conjunctivoclasis is especially seen. It's a redundant fold of conjunctiva, which is comes in between the lower lid margin and the eyeball, and it makes the tear film unstable. Patient comes generally in their 50s and 60s, and they will be telling of ocular irritation, some discomfort, redness. And when you see the tear film is perfectly fine, breakup time may be okay, but the tear film is not stable. So pay attention, ask the patient to look down and see if that fold you can judge. The initial treatment would be mild topical steroids for 6 to 8 weeks. Symptom improves, then think of using Restasis or other immunomodulators drops, along with low topical steroids and lubricants. Then if you have a allergic conjunctivitis, most commonly in our country is vernal catarrh. This can be associated with the dry eye symptoms, but there, dry eyes alone treatment would not work. It is important that we treat the vernal catarrh inflammation, and that inflammation, good control of inflammation itself will take care of the dry eye. You may need a little bit of lubricants, but primary treatment is of the vernal keratoconjunctivitis. Then there are many times I see in the clinic, patients are prescribed at least 6 to 7 bottles of different lubricants and different medications, and many of them have preservatives. And they went for the dry eye, but they developed, their problem becomes compounded because of these preservatives, because they are very, very toxic for the surface epithelium. And remember, ocular surface epithelia is integral part of the ocular surface ecosystem. If the surface epithelia are not happy, the tear film is not stable. So you will have worsening of the condition. When you do the staining, you'll find the SPKs there in the lower half, and especially on the medial side of the conjunctiva. Staining will be positive in the nasal area. So remember to look at the how many medications, how long the patients have been using. Do not prescribe unnecessary too many medications to the patient. There can be dry eye following severe conjunctivitis, especially adenoviral. Adenoviral conjunctivitis, I have seen patients who develop severe discomfort, and that happens mainly because of goblet cell destruction, their keratinization and metaplasia. So again, they need to be supported with mild topical steroids and preservative-free lubricants. What has been a unifying finding in last 15 years is that the dry eye of any origin, once it develops, is essentially, it's a surface immune-mediated inflammation. And remember, I showed in one of my slides that the conjunctiva has a lymphoid system, or like a conjunctiva-associated lymphoid system called COLT, and that perpetuates this inflammation. And these are all histological, immunohistological findings of the patients with the dry eye. You can do the immunofluorescence staining, immunoperoxidase staining on impression cytology or biopsies. And there has been a conclusive evidence that cyclosporin, tacrolimus, they are very helpful in moderate to severe dry eyes of immune mediated. It would not help in patients who have SJS. That is a different condition. If it's an allergic eye condition, it's a different situation. So remember which agent is useful and what kind of a treatment is required in a specific condition. Then the Sjogren syndrome is a clearly systemic autoimmune condition. It's a primary and secondary, where there is a glandular and ocular surface epithelia are destroyed because of the immune-mediated inflammation, and they produce aqueous tear deficiency, more severe than the known SS type. OS damage is severe, both basic and reflex tears are affected. And when you take the biopsy, you would find the infiltration in the conjunctiva, in the glands of the lymphocytes. When you do staining, Rose Bengal staining, this is how it may look like. There are specific diagnostic criteria for Sjogren's syndrome, and there are histological criteria, there are laboratory diagnostic criteria. Primarily, it is in the female, preponderance in the 4th to 5th decade. And usually the dry eye in these patients is quite severe, as you see in secondary cases like associated with rheumatoid arthritis as well. So how do we assess whether the tear film is stable or not? Whether what we are seeing, the dry eye symptoms, are actually correlate with the signs what we are seeing in the patient. So I'm not very fond of doing too many tests. Tear breakup time, helpful, but not totally reliable. This can be invasive, non-invasive, and generally we do a non-invasive nowadays, but if you have ocular surface analyzer, it gives beautiful readings, and therefore you don't really have to do fluorescein. But if you have a quick assessment, very good test is fluorescein staining. Once you do it, it's very helpful. And it can be done like, when you're just before taking the IOP, you put fluorescein. At that time, you can do the breakup time as well. You can do non-invasive based on like keratometer. Earlier, we used to do keratoscopy or TMS, but now ocular surface analyzers are quite often present, and they also give a very good reading. Surmer test, very commonly used, but not very reliable. It does not correlate, the severity of the disease does not the Surmer values. However, to quantify, it is helpful that you do a Surmer 1, reflex secretion without conjunctival stimulation, less than 5 millimeter in a minute is abnormal. And as I said earlier, it lacks correlation with irritation or staining. Surmer 2 is essentially with anesthesia, and Surmer 3 or a reflex nasal stimulation. Essentially, you take a Johnson bud and you irritate the nasal mucosa, and then do the Surmer. That is called reflex, measuring the reflex tearing, but that you do only after putting Paracaine or anesthetic drops in the conjunctival cul-de-sac. And these things will be affected in Sjogren's syndrome, but non-Sjogren dry eyes, the reflex tearing will be intact. And this is a cartoon showing the same thing, that if you do a nasal Surmer 2 with nasal stimulation, you'll find enhanced reflex tear flow and decreased in patients with Sjogren's syndrome. Then the most reliable test I depend on is the surface staining. So the fluorescent staining, and then the Rose Bengal. So fluorescein, as you know, it stains primarily the breach in the epithelium or the SPKs, which are early signs of breach in the epithelium. Rose Bengal is the dead or damaged epithelial cells. Primarily, if the cells are devoid of the mucin, they are stained. You can use both combined, what is called double staining. So fluorescein, simple, either you can use drops or as a strips. What we do have availability, very common now, is the strips, which is very easy to use, and then use a blue filter. Rose Bengals, it stains a little bit, so you may have to put a Paracaine, but Paracaine, you put it, destroys the surface, so it may give you false reading. So better than that is the Lisamine green. This is how the fluorescein may look like in a patient with dry eye. This is the Rose Bengal I showed you earlier. You may have the Lisamine green, which exactly does the same as Rose Bengal, and it does not stain, but not very easily found, or it's not easily available. Double staining, where you can combine the fluorescein and Rose Bengal, preservative free, and should not be overflow. So summary of this assessment, I depend primarily on patient on surface staining. to correlate the symptoms with signs and my clinical examination. Now, how do we manage the dry eye disease? I have pointed out, depending on the etiological agent, you treat accordingly. Like if you find Demodex when you're looking for blepharitis, you should pull out the eyelash and examine it under the microscope, and you will be able to see. And if you see, then there is a very specific treatment with treaty oil. I have been part of this DUCE-2 steering committee, which the guidelines came out in 2017. We were 15 people from around the world who were part of the steering committee, whose job was to do the overall planning of DUCE-2. And we have 11 subcommittees, 150 clinician, basic scientists, and research experts from around the world who participated in deliberations and then came out with these guidelines, which was published in Ocular Surface in 2017. So according to that DUCE-2 revised classification, the definition of the dry eye is it's a multifactorial disease of ocular surface characterized by the loss of homeostasis of the tear film and accompanied by ocular symptoms, in which tear film instability and hyperosmolarity, ocular surface inflammation and damage, and neurosensory abnormalities play etiological role. So you understand, once the homeostasis get disturbed, you have symptoms and you have alteration in the character of the tear film, and that itself becomes a etiology, and that itself perpetuated by immunological mechanisms. This is basically in nutshell the pathology. Essentially, whatever you are seeing, the alteration of the preocular tear film leads to damage to the surface epithelia, and epithelial damage leads to the disequilibrium in the system. There are many, a whole variety depending on the severity. With increasing severity, and these slides you can find on the Ocular Surface Journal or TFOS website, Tear Film Ocular Surface Society website. So what you have many kind of tear replacements. You have gel or gel eye drops, you have ointments, you have lid treatments, which we talked about. Punctal plugs, very briefly, in patients with Sjogren syndrome or secondary KCS, you may have to use moderate to severe dry eye punctal plugs, which are easily available, very easy to use. You may have to do punctal cautery for Demodex infestation, diagnose, treat with the treaty oil, which is very easily available in India now. And then prescription medicines like topical steroids, cyclosporin, tacrolimus, and systemic medications. This is a diagram which just gives you in a nutshell. If you are someone who is in research, or doing a trial or developing drugs, very helpful this system where you have triaging questionnaires, you have risk factor analysis, and then you, based on your symptomatology, like dry eye questionnaire or OSDI index, you can then do the homeostasis markers like invasive breakup time, osmolarity, ocular surface staining. But for us, clinician, we start with the homeostasis marker. The other part are part of the history and the risk assessment by history. But most of the things that you need to do is the clinical examination and try to understand what is the symptoms are due to, what the underlying cause of the dry eye. Dry eye itself is not a disease; it's just a syndrome. So the management, the modification of environment, not really very helpful. For example, as somebody who works in a air-conditioned environment, you can tell them that every couple of hours, if they take 5-7 minutes, come out and do the blinking exercises. That will be very helpful. Some people believe that these dietary modifications might be very helpful. Very important in the history taking is modification or elimination of offending topical and systemic drugs. They are a very important cause, especially if you are patients on anti-glaucoma medications. And then think of appropriate lubricant, lid hygiene, warm compresses, especially if there is a blepharitis and GD. Step 2, think of non-preserved ocular lubricants. Tear conservation, we talked about punctal occlusion, retaining goggles. They are helpful only in very severe dry eyes, which will be GVHD, severe KCS, or patients with the rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren syndrome. You may use overnight treatments like ointments. I typically use either steroid antibiotic ointments or a tacrolimus ointment in severe, moderate to severe dry eyes at night. And then appropriate treatment or these devices where you have a LipiFlow and other things are helpful. Their treatment value varies from patient to patient. For mild dry eyes, use lubricants. For moderate to severe dry eyes, depending on the underlying etiological, a pulse dose of topical steroids is very helpful. Then think of adding cyclosporin. If the patient tolerates and responds very well to topical steroids, which you can't continue for a long time, then think of using topical cyclosporin. Topical LFA antagonist drug is not available, I think, in India yet, but it is something new. And it's LFA is a leukocyte, it's a kind of a ligand at the lymphocytes. You can think of giving oral macrolide tetracycline antibiotics, especially for blepharitis. Oral secretagogues, I'm not very big fan of. I don't use autologous serum. Yes, they are helpful, especially in Sjogren syndrome. Therapeutic contact lenses, not the BCLs. Soft contact lenses really have no role in the dry eye management. What the rigid scleral lenses, especially the PROS lens or the Boston scleral lens, is very helpful. And many of my patients are on it, and it's easily available now in India from LVP. The step 4 would be topical steroid for longer duration. What I mean by longer duration is usually if it's a moderate or severe dry eye, especially if it is Sjogren syndrome or rheumatoid arthritis, but not VK, not OCP or not Steven Johnson. OCP is fine. The steroids are very important, and you use for 6 to 8 weeks in tapering doses, and then see if you need further. In between, you control with lubricants and the immunomodulators, cyclosporin, tacrolimus. Surgical modalities like amniotic membrane graft you may need for superior limbic keratoconjunctivitis or conjunctivochlesis once the medical treatment is not very effective. Punctal occlusions we talked about. Tarsorrhaphy is an extreme situation, especially if you have patients with the anesthesia or tumors who have been operated, or there is a some nerve palsy. In those situations, you would need. Otherwise, for dry eye per se, you would not need tarsorrhaphy. Minor salivary gland transplantation we are doing mostly in patients with Steven Johnson. Other situations is not required, and the way it is done is not the way earlier concept. Now we take lip mucosa along with the salivary glands and then put it just in under the conch in front of the superior rectus muscle insertion. So in summary, there has been a major shift in the paradigm of dry eye disease, that it is a immune-mediated problem. Irrespective of the cause, immune-mediated inflammation kicks in at some stage, and therefore you need to focus on eradicating that cycle. And that is highlights the role of topical immunomodulator teardrops along with the tear replacements. Pay attention to lit subtle clinical signs, which I showed you. And remember, there is a ocular surface damage associated with conjunctivitis and different medications. And Sjogren syndrome is clearly a autoimmune disease, and therefore needs treatment, systemic and topical immunomodulators. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take questions. Dr. Rajat?
Yeah, I'm switching on my video. There is some issue. Just give me, yes. So thank you, sir. It was a very engaging and enlightening talk, and I think it will certainly help our attendees for the decision making and for managing their dry eye disease patients. So moving on to the Q&A session, let's start with a question from Dr. Sanjeev Doshi. And the question is that what non-expensive tests one can do to determine the diagnosis of dry eye disease as well as to monitor the treatment effectiveness?
There's only two things that you need to do, doctor. Good slit lamp examination and the surface staining. The fluorescein staining is essential, and if you can find rose bengal or lissamine green, that will be very helpful. Nothing more than that. And most of my patients, I don't do anything beyond this. In a very selected patient, especially if it's Sjogren syndrome, I may do some systemic testing or a referral to a rheumatologist. Other than that, primarily a clinical diagnosis.
Right. There is a question from Dr. Gyanendra Kumar that do all patients require lubricant eye drops containing carboxymethyl cellulose after cataract surgery?
No, I don't use in any of my patients. I don't think it is required. I think it's over using these medication. If there is an elderly patient, and especially after 1 or 2 months of cataract surgery, if they complain of ocular irritation or they're unhappy about surface health, then you may use. But as a standard protocol, I do not use any of lubricants for any of my patients.
Right. There is a question from Dr. Shwetam that when the systemic, evaluation turns negative in case of the Sjogren syndrome, can we start immunomodulators in that case?
Absolutely. See, it's not necessary that systemic criteria or diagnostic criteria systemic you will find in every patient, and it depends on at what stage of disease the patient may be. If your ocular condition warrants that you need systemic medication, by all means, but they should not be used casually for mild disease because they do have side effects.
Right. There is a question from Dr. Prachand Gautam that what is the management approach for a severe dry eye disease case with recurrent filamentary keratitis?
This is one point I would like to emphasize, that when we say dry eye syndrome, severe dry eye with filaments, that means we need to try to understand what is the underlying cause. Is it Sjogren syndrome? Is it thyroid eye disease? Is there something else? Lids are problem. Maybe the patient has a papillary conjunctivitis. So try and look and examine all the elements which we talked about. Again, these elements are conjunctival health, preocular tear film, surface epithelia, and ocular surface sensitivity, and underlying systemic by history and review of systems. So if you don't find anything on those things, I would think, I do not believe in removing the filaments. Some people, some clinicians like to remove the filaments. I do not remove, and my rationale is this is essentially a disordered epithelial proliferation. If you can rectify that problem, those filaments will disappear. So if I have such a patient, I will treat with topical steroids, lubricants, and intense one, maybe every 2 hours pred-acetate for 2 weeks, then reduce every 2 weeks, 1 drop less. And at night time, a steroid antibiotic ointment, and see after 2 to 3 weeks.
Right, sir. There is a question from Dr. Neha. She wants to know the correct technique for the lid massage and warm compression, including the time we need to give it for the patients.
There are variety of different ways. There are YouTube videos available. I tell my patients to watch those videos. I demonstrate to them. And now, what we have, a variety of different masks available for hot fermentation. So which can be very well controlled in terms of the temperature, the duration. There are different masks available. Then lid massage, I tell them to start for the upper lid, start from the brows, and keep looking down and go down like this rolling movement and like this movement. So I show them like this on both upper lids. And similarly for lower lid, you put your fingers on your nose bridge and then go up and out. Because if you just do like this, you will be just pulling up the skin. Remember, the meibomian gland direction is along the vertically along the lid length. So you need to press them and bring towards the lid margin. If these things don't help, then maybe there are a variety of these devices now available, LipiFlow and other things. If patient can afford, that can be tried.
Right. There is a question from Dr. Sheetal that should Schimmer's test be done in all cases to diagnose dry eye disease? Question 1. If yes, Schimmer's test 1 or 2, which one is more useful?
It is not helpful in every patient. Number one, say for example, if it's a patient with completely bone dry surface in patient with SJS, there is no point. If there is a patient with OCP, or if the patient with VKC, in these the primary problem is something different. The ocular surface inflammation is what is killing. So where it will be helpful? Patient with Sjogren syndrome, patient where you are at the borderline and you want to understand whether is the quantity of the tears is affected in any way, and you may want to monitor. I would do the Surmer 1 in most situations. If I'm suspecting the Sjogren syndrome, then I will do Surmer 2, especially with the nasal stimulation.
Right. There is a question from so many of our attendees. Dr. Dinesh has also put the same, that there is a long list of lubricants available in the market.
Yes.
So in your clinical practice, how do you choose a lubricant, sir?
I think we should spend a few minutes here. I think this is the most confusing subject, and there are too many products, and our market space is very crowded. So how do we decide? For deciding the lubricants, you need to take into account what kind of patient you are dealing with, meaning what is the etiological diagnosis. Number 2, whether the dry eye, in your opinion, is mild, moderate, or severe. Number 3, what is the affordability of the patient? Can he afford, these tear supplements are very expensive. If patient who is affording type and has a severe dry eye, you want a molecule which can stay longer, which is preservative free, and ocular residence time is more. So I would go more for those molecules like what do you call sodium hyaluronate, or other molecules which are in that type. CMCs are mostly, if you are using the lubricants less than 4 times, for some reason.
Your voice is not coming. We cannot hear you, sir.
Okay, let me check my audio.
Now this is fine.
Maybe I moved little back.
Yeah, it is fine. We can hear you, sir.
So what I was saying is, those patients who have severe disease, you need to pay attention about the ocular residence time, the preservative free, important points. But if they can't afford, again, even if you prescribe, they won't buy. The patient on whom you are giving, say for example, a computer specialist, computer vision syndrome, I don't think there is very big rationale to give them a very expensive or these kind of medicines, because they really have symptoms because of the functioning style, not because of the surface related issue. Another element I decide is, when I find staining positive, that means whatever the tear film status is affecting the epithelia, and I would like to use more a molecule which will stay longer and which will be preservative free. I hope that answers, but it is a very difficult and complex problem. I realize that.
Right, sir. So we take on the next question from Dr. Pradeep, that is there any role of topical chloroquine phosphate in the management of dry eye disease?
I'm not sure. I don't think that there is a good evidence that it is very helpful, even though there are many companies which are marketing. I don't use it. I have no direct experience. And by reading biologically, I don't think that it makes sense at all.
Okay, so we take on the next question. How do we manage dry eye disease related to the wearing of contact lenses? Any specific guidance on that, sir?
See, the contact lens primarily depend on the clear film, because the soft contact lens needs a lot of hydration because their water content is very high, and the higher their water content, the higher is the decay, and they would need sufficient tear volume. If your patient is above 40, it's very difficult that they will be tolerating those contact lenses. So younger patient, not a problem unless there is associated myobomitis or blepharitis or lid hygiene issues. Other than that, an older patient, it will be a challenge. If they are very experienced user, they may still tolerate with frequent use of the lubricants. So I don't see there is any particular, remedy that you can do in those patients, adjustment to lifestyle. And if there's someone who really need it, then consider using Pros lens. They may appear very large, but they're very comfortable. Dry eye, because they have a fluid in the contact lens, which sits on the ocular surface.
Right. There is a question from Dr. Meenak that how is the tea tree oil used? Is it just rubbed over the eyelashes, or how do we use it?
Yes, it is. You can take on your finger and you can massage on the lid margin. And now, very interesting product have come in the Indian market. There are kind of a lid scrubs or a kind of a shampoo which is available, and which you can just while taking bath, close your eyes and rub in the eyelid margin on both sides, and then just wash off with your water.
Right. So we have a question from Dr. Suvidha. She wants to know your experience with the use of tacrolimus first. And she says that she has been using it for patients with allergic conjunctivitis, but patients report of burning sensation. This is the first question. Second question is, how do we prepare an autologous serum drop?
All right. First, let me answer the tacrolimus question. Yes, it is true. Some patient may not tolerate the tacrolimus eye ointment. And especially now we have 2 or 3 preparations of ophthalmic preparation. A few years back, we had only a skin ointment. So the tolerability of the ophthalmic formulations are much better than the skin ointment. In my patient who do not tolerate the eye ointment in the eye, I advise them to rub on the eyelid skin. And there is a sufficient amount of medicine which will trickle to the conjunctiva overnight. So rubbing it on the skin of the eyelid will be very helpful. The second question was about
autologous serum drops.
Autologous serum. See, what happens is that I have been making an LVP for many years in 98, 99, 2000. And the way I would do is you take, say, maybe 10 ml blood, and out of that 4 or 5 ml, you will get the serum. So what I used to do, tell the patient is that 1 ml of the serum, I'll put in one vial, seal it, and give it to the patient. I tell them that keep it refrigerated, take 1 vial at a time, and in that 1 ml, you make 4 ml of one of the tear lubricants. You mix any of which you use, and that will become your autologous serum eye drops. But I suggest that they should work blood bank, where you have systems of centrifuge and making the drops. What I used to do is in our microbiology lab, but that's not a very effective system, not a sustainable system.
Right. We have a question from Dr. Harshvardhan that you've been advocating the use of preservative-free drops, but how safe are the drops containing disappearing preservatives like SOC?
I think that they are also fine. I'm quite happy with the disappearing agents as well. Again, those, people should not, the doctors should not stick to a particular brand or type of the agents. What I prefer is I ask my patient, because generally they are very experienced. I ask them which of the agents that you tolerate well. So try to get a feedback from the patient, and then give little bit of knowledge that you may have about the ocular resident time, the based on the severity of the condition, and if the patient is not happy with the existing situation.
Right. We have a clinical scenario put by Dr. Sonia for one of her patients. Her patient is having ocular cicatricial changes. Biopsy is negative for immune-mediated pathology. The patient is on anti-glaucoma drugs for a long time, and at present on preservative-free drops, but the ocular surface is worsening. So how do we manage him?
Well, I think here pseudopemphigoid would be a very high priority, especially if the duration of anti-glaucoma medication has been long. So I will talk to the glaucoma doctor and see either they consider doing the glaucoma filtration surgery so that the medicines can be reduced, or the medicines should be changed to which are some epithelial surface friendly, and the frequency goes down, and use topical lubricants and use topical steroids to rescue the ocular surface.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. We take on the next question from Dr. Rekha. She wants to know the role of vitamin B12 and D3 in dry eyes.
I really don't have any experience, and I don't think that you can quantify the specify the role of vitamin D or B12 in dry eye per se. They may be overall for your health and well-being, but I'm not sure that there are a lot of data put up by different studies, but I'm not very convinced about these things.
We take on the next question from Dr. Basant, and the question is, what is a effective remedy for the computer vision syndrome, dry eye? Because I think it applies to us also. We from the corporate world, we work day and night in front of the laptop. So please guide us, sir. How do we manage this dryness related?
The more important to the computer vision syndrome is the lifestyle and working alteration in the work environment. Few things I suggest to my patients is that first examine the level of the screen of your computer. Wherever you are sitting, you should not be looking up. Your screen should be at the same level as your eye, or it should be slightly down, so that your neck muscles, your face muscles are not tired looking at the screen. Number two, every couple of hours, take a blinking break, meaning sit back either on the seat or walk around, but do 50 forced blinking exercises. Open, close, close, open, close, open. So what happens is, I was telling, when we are doing a activity which needs a lot of attention, our intellectual energy, our nervous energy is directed that way, and blinking becomes infrequent. And if you are a borderline ocular surface health, your surface will break down, and you will see these symptoms. So these two alterations, and then third thing I tell them is use some lubricants, especially if they live in an air-conditioned environment for 10, 12 hours, 14 hours, especially in the afternoons. That will help. Fourth, look at their lid margin and lid hygiene, because if the lid margin is poor, or if they have meibomitis, then their surface will break down faster.
There is a question from Dr. Dinesh that how do we manage post-adenovirus stromal opacities?
I think only reliable solution to me is if they are not in the visual axis, and if the patient does not have light sensitivity or photophobia, I would not use any strong steroids. I'll just use lubricants. If they are within the visual axis, or if the patient is bothered due to light sensitivity, I'll use initially for 4 to 6 weeks, say Pred Forte type of drops, and then taper them, and then switch to soft steroids like Flerax or Lotepred or something like that. Or there's another one in market. I don't remember the name. So those drops but use them for longer time, 2 to 3 months. And these are notorious. I have patients in whom they stayed for 5 years. They go away, then come back. So you have to have patience.
Right. We take on the next question from Dr. Urmila, and she wants to know that do you use vitamin A and omega-3 supplements in your practice for management of dry eye disease patients?
I don't use any of those things.
Right. We move on to the next question. And the next question is on the factors which cause the worsening of dry eye symptoms. What are the common factors in your practice you see which cause worsening of dry eye symptoms?
Dry eye symptoms, mostly prolonged working hours, emotional upset, the environmental pollution, some the medications the patients are using. Sometimes they may not be aware, and they may not tell you that there's no relevance. Say a patient is taking antipsychotic medication, anxiolytics, the patient may not tell you that has no bearing on that. So paying attention to overall these things, and sometimes listening to the patient. Like for example, the patient number 2 or 3, the lady, perimenopausal lady, which I presented, had mild dry eye symptoms, and those are not really dry eye. It's a perimenopausal syndrome or a menopausal syndrome, wherein the epithelia throughout the body, the mouth, nose, eye, vagina, throat, all epithelia need some sort of the hormonal support, and those hormonal disturbances cause these changes. And at the same time, the person becomes more worried, they are scared, fear, anxiety. So this is whole complex. And if you don't identify and reassure all elements that this is not a disease, this is a phase in your life, and you will grow out in few years, and you will not go blind because of this. So it's very important to understand the person. And if you are very attentive clinician, you will, within few sentences, when you walk in, you will be able to make that out.
Right. Dr. Amit Garg wants to know what is your experience with LipiFlow treatment?
LipiFlow treatment. Well, I did on myself in about 2 years back. Before I moved out of LVP, there was a demo machine. Initially, when I got it done for a few weeks, it was fantastic. I thought, oh my God, everything felt so good. But then after another few weeks, and it went back again. I was told that I should have at least 2 or 3 sessions. I do have moderate MGD, but I have a few patients who I sent, but I sent only patients who are very difficult, meaning very severe disease. I wanted to try it in patients with Stevens-Johnson syndrome, where there is a tremendous issue on the MGD and the surface. None of them are very happy. So overall, I don't have really a great opinion, but it's quite expensive eye spa.
Right. So we take on the question from Dr. Deepshikha, and she wants to know that at what time or what stage of the disease we need to plan for punctal plugs.
Punctal plugs, the best way to go about is based on the surface staining and the Surmer values and the underlying disease. Three factors. How that will affect? Say, for example, if you have a patient with Sjogren syndrome, patient with GVSD, patient with Stevens-Johnson syndrome, moderate to severe dry eye, they would not improve by itself. So punctal plugs will help, and whether they will help or not, you can do what we call temporary collagen plugs, which are essentially like a catgut suture, which dissolve within 6 weeks. So you can put them and assess after 6 weeks how the patient feels. Has the frequency of drops has gone down? Is the surface staining changed somewhat? Is the comfort improved? If any of those things are, anything you and patient discover, I will use the silicone punctal plugs. And if it is a Stevens-Johnson and severe, I would do a punctal cautery of the lower puncta, both or lower lids. That will make a big difference in their life.
Right. There are a number of questions on the role of ribapamide drops. What is your take on that, sir?
I have not used, and I don't intend to use, because it's not making any much sense to me at the moment.
Dr. Meena wants to know that can sodium hyaluronate drops cause calcification in cornea? Have you come across such patients?
No, I have not seen.
Okay, so there is a question from Dr. Nayan that there are many patients who complain of watering after the cataract surgery. So what can be the reason behind this?
In watering, you should pay attention to the intraocular inflammation, anterior chamber inflammation. If there may be subtle subclinical inflammation, in those patients, I would try topical steroids extended period, maybe another 6 to 8 weeks or 2 to 3 months, low dose, along with the lubricants. Some people don't heal very well, or they take longer time. So the incision, when you look at under the microscope, you will find that area is a bit inflamed. That does not mean it's dry eye.
Dr. Abraham wants to know that would you advise the microwave heating device for heating the lid in MGD disease?
Yes, I mean, I don't know the outcome, what kind of the results are, but whatever I have seen and read a little bit, I think that will be helpful. Basically, it is some form of heating, and the rationale is that I showed the pultaceous material, the lipid material will get loosened up, and it can be expressed out with the lid massage.
Right. We have a question from Dr. Basant that can we use topical steroids when dry eye is associated with SPK or oval epithelial defects?
In SPKs, definitely, I have no problem using it, but I will see the patient more like within a week or so. If there is an epithelial defect, it's not that defect is a problem. I do use steroids in epithelial defect, like for example in chemical burn. But here I would want to understand why is there is an epithelial defect. And simply saying it is because of the dry eye, I'm not very convinced, and I'm not comfortable with this diagnosis.
Dr. Bhavleen wants to know that when do you suspect thyroid disease to be behind the dry eye symptoms in a patient with normal T3, T4 estimation?
If there is sort of other signs like lid lag or what we excessive scleral show, or those things, if they are there, then you may be. Otherwise, in my practice last 25 years, I haven't seen too many patients with thyroid eye disease unless they are very obvious, gross thyroid ophthalmopathy, and then you have dry eye. But generally, I don't find this is a major issue.
Right. There is a question on what are your comments on the combinations of trehalose with coenzyme Q10 being used with sodium hyaluronate in the treatment of dry eye disease? Your experience with such combinations?
I don't have direct experience, so I can't really comment. But out of all this, I think the sodium hyaluronate is a molecule which may be working. Other coenzymes and other things, I don't know how helpful they are.
There is a question from Dr. Shwetam that is it important to give steroids in the acute phase of adenoviral conjunctivitis to prevent conjunctival scarring and prevent future recurrence of dry eye disease?
For all my adenoviral conjunctivitis, this is the first thing I would start: topical steroids along with antibiotic. I don't know whether it prevents the further attacks, but it's very important to understand, like COVID, COVID creates cytokine storm in the lungs, in the human body. Similarly, adenoviral creates a cytokine storm on the ocular surface and conjunctiva. And that's why you see such a severe reaction in the form of membranes, swelling. If you don't do, those patients will be miserable. I have even given systemic steroids to few patients in the acute phase. The inflammation is so severe. So My standard treatment for adenoviral acute conjunctivitis consists of topical steroids, pradacetate every 2 hours for the first week or 10 days, and then see along with the Vigamox or any broad spectrum antibiotic. I don't use, again here, lubricant is not required because reflex tearing is so much that you don't need unnecessary medication.
There is a question or a suggestion from Dr. Lalit that in cases of filamentary keratitis, he has been using 5% betadine for the affected areas, and this helps in the prevention of recurrence. Have you been using it in your practice?
I have not used, but it's good to know that it is helpful, and we'll try in future.
Right. We take the last question. I don't think we have any more questions after that. Do we recommend the usage of preservative-free lubricating drops even for milder forms of dry eye disease, or only for the severe dry eye disease?
For mild, I don't think it's an overkill. There's no need. Only one indication: if your patient is very rich and you want to impress them, like that, some people feel, if you don't write expensive medicines, they feel that you are not a good doctor. So this is for non-medical reasons. Otherwise, I don't think that it's very helpful, or you should use very expensive molecules in such a mild condition.
Right. We've received one more question, so let's take this. This is from Dr. Rajiv Vesh, and he puts the question like, after menopause, a number of women suffer from dry eye disorder. This is his opinion. What is your take on that?
It is a well-known, established fact that, just before I said, in menopause, it's not only the dry eye, dry mouth, all mucosal surfaces are affected. And it's very important to counsel the patient that it's not the eye problem. It is the hormonal changes which happen during the woman's body at that time. And the system will stabilize in few years. So don't worry that it's not a serious problem. You will not go blind because of that. Because those fears, anxiety also increases in these patients. It's very important to reassure. And those who have severe symptoms, send them to clinical psychologist. Ask them to seek opinion for their management of menopausal syndrome.
Right, sir. So we will come to the end of this session now. I think we have taken a number of questions. We have probably addressed 95% of the questions, and we are very happy to do so. And once again, we thank you for your very engaging talk and for your insightful answering of the queries. And we would also like to thank all the attendees for logging on to this session. I think we have close to 1,000 doctors who have logged in, and they have put in so many queries and made this session so interactive and insightful. And I thank one and all once again. So with this, we come to the end of this